One of my favorite channels on YouTube is a guy called Sisyphus55. He does great videos on philosophy, specifically videos about philosophers and their individual philosophies, which is great for me because I have a very difficult time connecting ideas to people and names. I just remember the ideas and then forget who said them. I'm also a big fan of Slovenian philosopher Slavoj Žižek, and not just for the meme factor. I mean, of course he is a living meme, but he also has a certain approach to philosophy that I have shared since, like, basically knowing that Žižek even exists. Or that philosophy exists, for that matter. Not even getting into all the higher Hegelianism stuff, the profane practice of contradicting something that you yourself said is something that I have engaged in since the dawn of me being able to speak. I really like to provide arguments, then provide counter-arguments, and then never answer the question that I originally posed. I don't always do this, of course, but it's not my job to tell you what to think. That's not what I'm here for. Whenever I do a video like this, it's just the exhaust fumes of the constant process of re-evaluating all of the beliefs that I have, which I engage in all of the time because I have nothing better to do. The worst mistake you can make is to think that you are right about anything ever. It's all about being less wrong than everybody else. Now, a few days ago, Sisyphus55 made a video on Slavoj Žižek, which I was delighted about because it was a very good video. But he mentioned something that sort of gave me pause. Anytime on the internet when anyone discusses Žižek beyond just showing him inhaling 2 hot dogs at the same time, you will have third semester philosophy students just insisting vehemently that Slavoj Žižek is really just an idiot who's more interested in being polemically entertaining than actually talking about philosophy, because all he does is tear shit down without actually contributing any solutions to the problems he points out. And I always assume that this is just third semester philosophy students being third semester philosophy students, but it turns out that actual real philosophers who do actual philosophy for actual money say this shit unironically. Noam Chomsky, who is a man I respect immensely, critiques Žižek in this manner. And, you know, I mean, like, why? Why am I not allowed to point out your problem? Why is it my job to come up with a solution for your problem? It's your problem. I'm just pointing it out because clearly you haven't seen it. I'm giving you the opportunity to fix it. Now, personal experience may color this a little bit, but I do have a habit of pointing out when things are wrong with things that I see, and a lot of people tend to get a bit offended at that. And I'm not talking about the situations even where it's just pointless to point out a problem. Like you tell someone who is ugly that they're ugly. I mean, that's just insulting people at that point. It's not really productive. I'm talking a specific plan that is designed to achieve something. A supply chain type situation, setting up an event. You know the girls who organize prom in high school? I don't know if that's how it works in the United States, but being not professional event managers, they will make some mistake, and being very close to the thing, it's sometimes difficult to get an outside perspective and see what is wrong with your plan. It may seem weird to you that they're not seeing it, but it's an entirely normal human thing. However, if you point out the problem and don't immediately accompany that with offering a solution to that problem, suddenly you're a bastard. But here's the thing. Whether or not you offer a solution has absolutely no bearing on the validity of the criticism. Like, imagine calling up the fire department and going, yeah, there's a house that's burning down the street, and your response is, oh, well, how do you propose we put it out then? And it's like, I don't know, fucking, like, put water on it? Oh, what if it's a grease fire? You clearly don't know what you're talking about. You see how that's insane, right? It's the fire department. It's their area of expertise. They're supposed to fix it. And this isn't something that goes away with people as they get older, I have found. It's why the rebels were able to blow up the Death Star, because every time someone brought up the obvious design flaw with it, they got force choked. Instead of of, going, oh, well, yeah, that is actually a bit of a problem. I think maybe we should bounce that back to the engineering department. After all, this is, as far as weak links go, this is a pretty severe weak link. It's a very weak link. It might blow up our whole plan. And I think I may have found part of the reason why this is, right? It's just a fancy way of shutting someone down for what you feel is a personal slight. Whereas I'm just trying to make sure we can keep oppressing people all over the galaxy. There is, of course, a factor of feeling uncomfortable with the construct of thought when suddenly one of the bricks in it is missing. There is now a hole here where there previously wasn't one. But I think in a way that we really don't like to admit to as much as maybe we should, the problem with critiquing some aspect of something without offering a solution reveals a flaw in your thinking in a much more permanent way than if the person who had critiqued your thing had immediately fixed your problem. If the critique is accompanied with a solution, you can just immediately plug that hole, but if it isn't, you have the problem that there's now a big gap in the agenda exposing your mistake for the whole world to see until someone, preferably you, comes up with a solution. It's a problem that just sort of shows up, and that gives people anxiety. Now you might be thinking, Burger, what are you talking about? These are not just regular people like you and me, they're philosophers, they're public intellectuals, they're some of the most well-educated minds in the whole world. But, they are though? Just regular people like you and me, I mean? There is a sanctity, or rather a sanctimoniousness, should I say, around intellectual academia in our culture that makes us forget that these people are ultimately, though highly intelligent, absolutely certainly, and definitely know what they're talking about, and have very informed opinions, they're still flawed human beings. Being smart does not mean you're not insecure. Probably a lot of you know that it's rather the opposite. Anyone who's even taken a whiff of academia with the slightest bit of a social sense will be aware that it is full of just petty grievances that translate into really trying to make arguments against this person's ideas because you disapprove of them personally. And this isn't just limited to academia, it's true everywhere, especially things that we hold sacred. It's true about politics, corporations, public institutions, religious organizations. Nothing is spared from the flawedness of humanity. We just kind of like to try to forget that because we are ultimately children who like to believe that our parents have it all figured out and they're these greater beings that have all the answers, instead of just sort of accepting that they too are just holding on by the seat of their pants, or however that saying goes. It's feelings all the way down, is what I'm trying to say. Now, I don't think that critiquing an idea automatically invalidates it, although that is the fear that people have, that if something is considered sacred and somehow also potentially wrong, it loses its inherent value. I'd argue that in many cases it makes the idea more valuable, right? Because an idea that you know is wrong is a mistake that you're not going to make. But some people don't like that, because let's be honest, even though they bill themselves as intellectuals, they're just smart people who want daddy to tell them what to think, so they can never be wrong about anything ever. And this is why I like philosophers like Žižek, because he pulls back the curtain on how the sanctity of intellectualism is in fact bullshit. The reason people don't like references to spaghetti westerns in their philosophy texts is the same reason why Catholics threw a fit when the Pope donned an anime gown. It was fucking with some metaphysical quality that they would never admit they really care about in that particular thing. It ruins the aesthetic. It doesn't even need to be transgressive in content. I think a lot of people get a lot more offended when something is transgressive in form than they would of, say, a complete upheaval of their entire belief system wherein the proper rituals and traditions are observed. But then I am on the record for publicly stating that a guy who is known in many circles primarily for shoving a banana up his ass is one of my primary sources and influences for my political philosophy. Because I do think it is a good idea to perform some profane philosophy. There's a lot of ideas up there in those ivory towers that could be put into much simpler, terms, and I would actually argue it might be most of them. And given that half the skill of being a philosopher is an ability to articulate ideas that other people have also but can't properly grasp, I can't help but feel that this is by choice, at least to a certain extent. Because using big words makes you seem more smart. And sometimes if you use big enough words, people won't figure out whether what you're writing is bullshit drivel or genius until it's way too late. There are obviously exceptions to this. There's philosophers who are just terrible at writing or who just do not give a shit about properly communicating their ideas. They just want to put them down on paper and move on to something else. That's entirely acceptable. But the reason usually I highly suspect is more often than not ego. I mean, of course, many of these ideas require prior knowledge in order to properly understand them, and jargon is a very useful tool for experts in a field to properly communicate with each other. And that's the point of jargon. It's there to facilitate discourse. And there is, of course, also always the fear that in our post-truth world, people will just take a bit out of something that they don't fully understand, misconstrue it in some way, and then use it for a purpose for which it was never intended. But let's be honest here for a second. That happens anyway, all the time, so I don't think that is a risk we are actually taking. But you cannot deny that at least a part of you would feel a lot less special if this thing that is often perceived as holy and sacrosanct would somehow become a profane thing that isn't as elevated above everything else, and where essentially you would lose a spark of the divinity within you that stems from your sacred cow. And like all sacred cows, this one deserves to be slaughtered, the prime cuts turned into beef for cheap burgers that you sell for like $1 on the side of the road, and on the other side of the road there's the carcass of your holy cow to be picked clean by the vultures, and then you don't even respect the animal enough to use all of it. At least that is my opinion on sacred cows. Thank you very much for watching this video. Like, comment, subscribe, share this to your relevant communities, but do not spam them. Consider supporting me on Patreon or Subscribestar, buying some of my merchandise or my short story collection. And in that spirit, always remember that even the smartest people in the world are ultimately still people. And see you around, cunts.